Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGeek webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is Rejigging Communities within an Enterprise. Our guest speaker today is Ms. Ambika Natarajan, General Manager, Head KM Delivery Assurance at HCL. She played various roles across a career of 15 years that includes sub-editor for a print media, courseware and instructional design, e-commerce trainer, freelance web development, KM and training consultant, and head of KM for delivery assurance in HCL Technologies. A postgraduate in physics and electronics specialization, a certified knowledge manager from International Knowledge Management Institute, she has completed the Emerging Leadership Program from Harvard Business School. Ambika holds an accreditation from Sinefin on Future Backwards Envisioning Model, part of the Women's Leadership Team at HCL Technologies. She is a gold medalist in her under and postgraduate, responsible for putting together the KM framework for the delivery organization at HCL for last 6 years. Core work areas and passion include communities, knowledge management and processes, knowledge management strategy, design, execution, mentoring, K indices, analytics, KM automation, K modeling, employee engagement, social architecture for an enterprise, diversity, white spaces, indication, to name a few. So without further delay, I introduce you to our guest speaker. Over to you, Ms. Ambika.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Mohini, and hello everyone who's joined in for the call today. Thank you so much for joining the session. It's a virtual audience, and the challenging part of the virtual audience is that I don't get to see you, so I only get to know you from the questions that you're going to raise and the conversations that we are going to have. But when I spoke to the organizer, interestingly, what I got to know is the audience for the TechGeek webinars that are conducted is predominantly folks from the IT industry. Having understood that, the way I have structured the session today is it is aimed at anyone who wants to either start a new community or make more out of existing communities within their organization or in their purview, is a part of some community or the other, or is toying with the idea of setting up a new one, either in their department or within the organization. Now, another point that I want to share is this seminar is not about citing good practices from other organizations, neither is it about picking up case in point. Instead, what I have put together for all of you listeners is a set of very practical use cases or scenarios, as I call them, which would go on to forming a solid reason or a purpose for setting up and nurturing and growing communities in your organization. So that's what I have for you today. The next 40 minutes is going to be on the presentation, but I'm going to leave a lot of time for us to have your questions and also for us to have conversations, because that is where I will also get to understand if you have any specific scenarios in mind that you would like to understand how to take it up and how to go about setting it in your organization, right? So we'll start that. Now, before we get on to the very first slide, I wanted to do a quick sizing and understanding of what you know about communities. Have you been a part of communities? So I'm going to ask the organizer, Mohini, to open up the first poll that I have put together for all of you, and please do cast your choice in terms of whether you have been a part of communities or you want to be a part of communities. So there's a poll here, and I would like you to share your choice here. Yeah, so do we have the poll open?
We've the poll open, and about 61% of the people have voted. They're still voting.
Okay. So Mohini, you will sum up the poll results for me, right?
Yeah, I would do that. So Ambika, we have about 80% of the people, of the attendees who have voted for us. About 36% say yes, heard, and I'm part of the communities. 34% of them say no, not heard, and 30% say yes, heard, but not part of any community.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for participating in the poll. And I think one of the fundamental tenets of any community is that it thrives on active participation. So by participating, I think the very first tenet is met for this webinar where all of you have casted your choice, which is wonderful. So I'm now going to the very first slide, which is about what is a community, or how would you define a community? One of the most standard definitions of a community of practice is from a person called Wenge. So this says communities of practices are groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. So this is a definition from Wenge. He's one of the most quoted community philosophers and champions, and this is a site from where I have picked this up. Definitions apart, if you do a simple search on communities in an organization, you will get over 70 lakh results, and the results only keep growing every day. So communities is no longer a management fad. It may have been a few years before, but today communities in large enterprises, large and small enterprises, are a way of working. Most of the enterprises do adopt it. Now, what have I put here in terms of a P, an I, an R, and then there are several dots here, which means there could be several other extensions. Now, what I have by putting this here, what I infer is that communities are of different types. So you could have communities of practice. The P can stand for a practice. It could be a community of purpose. It could be a community of passion. There are communities of interest, and then there are communities for roles. So the possibilities, the permutations and combinations of what communities can do is boundless. So as I say, sky is the limit. But what does all this P, I, R, and all mean? So whatever it means, there are structures, there are processes, there could be frameworks which could be enabling the P's and the I's and the R's. But net, the definition of a community stands, which is they are groups of people, people like you and me. We have a common interest, or we have a common pain area, or a concern, or a passion to do something. So we come together, we interact, and we keep working on it so that we keep improvising on how to get it done better as we interact regularly. So this is what communities are all about. Okay, so we said communities are not a new thing. It's no longer a management fad. I also said that communities can have different kinds of permutations and combinations. So if we have all of this, then what is the challenge? Why are we talking about rejigging communities of practice? Do we have a problem at all in the first place? So let's go over this, and let me draw out the entire canvas for you in terms of where we are today, where we need to go, and what are some of the possibilities of reaching there. Okay, so the canvas that I have laid out for you is, yes, we are talking about communities in an enterprise. We do know that there are plethora of communities in the World Wide Web, in the world. So you have social communities which are facilitated through social application systems, and then you have informal communities which meet. You have communities driven by NGOs. There are a whole lot of other communities. So the scope of today's conversation is about communities in an enterprise. In an enterprise which has an ever-growing distributed workforce, screen sharing is paused. Do we have a challenge here? One second. So we have a problem here, Mohini. Are you able
I
to
can
see
see the canvas slide there.
Okay, because I get moving from this window message which says, it's going to pause the application sharing. So just a second.
Can you please click on the show my screen button again? Can you try checking that?
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, it's come back.
Okay.
Okay, so what we have is a distributed workforce, and in the distributed workforce, we're also looking at project teams themselves being distributed. There are large enterprises where you have diverse service portfolios and an interplay of multiple disciplines. So you could have an interplay of having a community which would need, say, representation from the automation group, the people enabling team, the employee engagement. So it could be an interplay of multiple disciplines coming together for a cause, for a reason. So this is a typical canvas. Now in this canvas, what do we have when we say this is the canvas? What are the possibilities for us? So the palette that we have, the options that we have is that in a distributed environment like this, we have an ever-burgeoning social tools that is hitting us day in and day out. So what once started as just a document management system, today we're looking beyond repositories. So we have feeds, we have character streams, we have microblogging, right? And then we have chat, we have chat or instant messaging. So we've got multiple social tools in the organization that we can utilize for people to get connected. Now, having said that, the other good part of it is easy access, easy reach, and both of these put together, there's easy dispersion. And what makes all this icing on top is you have the mobile effect. So just in time, at the click of a button on my mobile, I can get information updates, I can look up for people, I can do all of that. The challenge, the other challenge which brings up an opportunity for us is the dynamics of the operating playing field. So we know that the industry dynamics are so volatile that today a lot of strategic plans and decisions are like a 90-day plan. And you've got to realize some of your goals within the 90 days. You've got to have your quick wins. You've got to catch those early indicators of success. So this is the dynamics of the operating playing field in which we are operating today. So what are the possibilities? Possibilities, therefore, are that while when we have these kind of dynamics, and there are communities today which get formed, which are like informal and interest-based, if we need to get more out of these communities, if we want to maximize the benefits that come out of us for the organization as well as the community through some of these initiatives, then we need to move them more towards a formal yet lightweightly governed communities of practice. And these communities could be introduced even to address a temporary scenario or a situation. So these kind of communities will come together, they will do the knowledge sharing, they will seed innovation, and then they can disperse on to become a part of some other community, or they can cease to coexist. So all possibilities that are listed here are quite feasible. So communities typically come together where people want to learn. So we have seen informal groups where people register because either they want to ask questions to a set of SMEs, or they want to answer questions which are posed by other peers and practitioners like them. So that's more of a sharing community which can mature to become a learning kind of community. There are communities where the focus is on introducing innovation, on feeding innovation, or in generating new ideas related to a subject area. It could be domain, it could be a tool, it could be a process, a practice. So you have endless combinations on which you can think of innovating. And then there are communities which come together to mine good practices from a distributed workforce. So these communities can self-evolve. So a learning community can go on to becoming an innovative community. An innovative community can go on to becoming a good practices mining community. So all these possibilities are feasible. They do happen in real time. Okay, so now we're going to jump into a set of scenarios. This is coming to some practical scenarios where a community could be a force multiplier, and it could give you those results that would otherwise be difficult to attain with a very structured approach to it. So the first scenario that I have put together is, let's say you have a core group in your organization, and this core group wants to establish two-way interactions with its distributed user base. So here we are consciously agreeing that the user base is very distributed. So there is no single way to reach out to each and every one of them because you don't know if the response will be the way it is expected. So you still want to engage them through some other vehicle, and the community could be one such vehicle. Now, why do you want to reach out to them? Because you have some very focused things that you want to achieve with this interaction. One, you want to continuously understand the changing preferences of this user base. Now, why do you want to understand the changing preferences? Because this user base is also the consumer of the services that you are providing as a group. So if you want to reach out to this group and you want this group to be your #1 advocate and user of your services, so the first thing is to understand what are their changing preferences. So that's one. Second is, once you understand these changing preferences, you want to influence these users. How do you want to influence them? You want to influence them with insights. And these insights would typically comprise of how some other sub-user group is benefiting from the services of this group. So you're going to use those kind of motivational and case study driven approaches to increase the uptake of the group services. And once you do that, you also want to mine what are the usage highs and lows of the user so that you can do corrective interventions. And this group can also plan how they want to take up the next set of services or enhance their existing services within the organization. So this is one scenario where a community of practice can prove to be very beneficial, and this kind of a community can continue to grow and offer very, very valid alignment with the business goals of the company. The second scenario is you have a central team which is responsible for continuous improvement. So let us say this group is, let's say it's like a quality group or it's a process group. And this is a group that wants to do continuous improvements. It is responsible for continuous improvement. And it wants to embark on a productivity improvement initiative in a specific area. Okay? So to do that, one of the first things it wants to do is it already has data-driven insights. So this group is privy to a lot of organizational data about what is the current state and other things. But it wants to size up the current state in the ground with the actual user feedback. So it wants to supplement its analysis. And for this, it needs a larger group of user base with whom it can interact. So this central team definitely can leverage a community of practice, do the first set of sizing up whether the distributed workforce is able to leverage this process improvement initiative idea, or whether they are buying into the productivity improvement initiative that this team wants to embark upon. That sizing up can be done using a community of practice by the central team. Now, having done that, it also wants volunteers who will double up as advocates, because any change needs change advocates. So it can reach out to that larger, enthusiasts who are subscribers of the community, take the experts and the practitioners from that community and use them and ask them to double up as advocates, so that a lot of these productivity improvement experiments that they want to conduct can be sourced. So they can crowdsource it to these change champions or to these change advocates. Now, having done that, it can use all the insight it gets from the sizing, from the productivity experiments that are conducted, and also from the feedback from this distributed workforce of volunteers or community subscribers to draw out a realistic and a realizable roadmap. Right? So this is a second scenario. Now, it would be impossible for just one project team or a small team to do this without the support, without the practical insights of a larger audience of users, of consumers. So this is one scenario where a community can play a very, very powerful role. The third scenario is, let us say we have created a new role in the organization. This role hasn't been in the organization so far. The organization service portfolio itself has changed, or it has expanded, diversified. It could be any of those triggers. And these kind of changes has necessitated for the creation of a new role by the HR organization, the HR team in the organization. Now, it's very important to understand the dynamics of this role for whoever is going to get into the role. One, that the role is very critical for business. So for this role to perform, it is crucial because it's a business do or die. So let's say it's as critical as that for business. The responsibilities that come with this role are complex. Okay, so it's not an easy set of do 20 tasks and this is what your role is expected to do. So it's not on the lower order of the role, but it's in the higher order of the role responsibilities. So responsibilities are complex. Now the third is the influx is very high. So which means that there are going to be a lot of new people or people who will be new to the role. So these people could be existing people from an organization, or they could be new people, not only new to the organization but also new to the role, or they could be new to the organization but may have performed the role earlier. So you could have all these permutations and combinations. But net, the influx into the role is very high, right? So that's the third attribute for this scenario. So in these three combinations, what stands out as a big challenge is that yes, we can always put together a learning module, a learning curriculum, and say this is the content, please go through this, get yourself certified, and then you're ready to do the role. But then the finer nuances that are there, the practical aspects of executing the role, because you remember the first point I said is it's a complex role, which means the role may involve a complex interplay of multidisciplines. One of the things that we saw in the earlier slide is where you have an interplay of multiple disciplines. So in this kind of a role, the key differentiator would be an immersive learning. Immersive learning so that there's role playing, so that there are practitioners from the ground who, one or two or few of them who already executed the role, who can say what are the challenges in reality when you get into playing this role, and what are some of the risks that you can anticipate so you can mitigate it, or you can be proactively prepared for it. So all these aspects. Now this comes when you have the community which is role-based. This is community of R. So role-based communities help in addressing this kind of a scenario. Now when this kind of a community gets formed, one of the big advantages is that you create a cohort of practitioners who are continuously interacting with practical insights, with practical challenges, and thereby adding more and more value to the way that particular role itself is executed. The fourth scenario, I'm on the scenario 4, where it's a typical scenario where you have a learning department, and the learning department has introduced a new e-learning certification course. So the certification course does have theory, it has blended learning, and the theory needs to be explained with practical applications on the ground. And the learning needs to continue beyond certification. So it's not enough if someone gets certified and gets back working. So to hit the ground, ground running very effectively, the person who gets certified, the newly certified person, also needs supplemental insights from SMEs, from real-time cases and case studies, from whiteboarding and other kind of output that comes from practitioners who are playing the role, who are already certified. So these kind of inputs need to come. Over and above all this, the learning department will also look for continuous inputs from this whole cohort. So the group of people who are getting certified periodically and coming out of the department with this certification and applying the learnings in real-time scenario. So that application in turn will tell the learning department what are the gaps in what was taught as e-learning and what has been applied, so that those gaps can be addressed and make the course continuously relevant. Otherwise the course has the risk of getting outdated. So this is another scenario where communities play a very vital role. They can play a very significant role in augmenting the learning content and the learning methodologies that are put together by structures. Okay, so I'm on scenario number 5, which is, so far we were talking about central teams, distributed teams, we're talking about organizational groups, HR, role-based, so we're talking about that. Now I'm coming to a scenario which could be closer home, which could even be just a project team, a large distributed virtual project team, where the project team has members working across multiple geos or even within the same geo across multiple facilities, multiple locations. So while the project team may be executing its tasks very, very efficiently in terms of having a work-based task breakdown, allocation, there are automation systems, there are processes in place, the processes are digitized, so all that is fine. But then the manager of the team feels that one key element that is missing amongst team members is the team stickiness or the team bonding, because the team never has an opportunity to interact, to go for a coffee together, or even to chat over lunch, to have informal breakout sessions. So there's no opportunity because it's a distributed team. So they could use the tenets of the community to get interactions happening, to increase team stickiness, and also get good practices to be exchanged between the team members, and use this entire stickiness to seed fresh ideas. Fresh ideas either for continuous improvement of processes, or better reporting techniques, or better learning, discovering new experts. So there could be a whole lot of things that could spawn off because of the increased team stickiness. So a virtual project team also can be approached like a community, and the tenets of the community can be used with the managers, managers support and managers advocacy. So it could be run as a community as well. Right? So these are the 5 scenarios that I put together so that you can look at practically where can communities help. These are just few scenarios. So we have several such scenarios which we can look at. You can extrapolate and look at several other scenarios in your context of work or in your organization. Right? So having said that, we're going to take a pause now, and I'm going to have my next poll put up for you to share your opinion. Which is about, do you think we can measure communities or not? Right? So, yeah, Mohini, please have the next poll up. Do you think communities can be measured? So we've seen what are communities. We've also seen some scenarios where communities can be seeded in an organization to make a difference. So yeah, so do we have the poll results, Mohini?
We have around 73% of the people who have already voted, and out of that 74% have said yes, 11% are saying no, and 18% are saying not sure.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So that brings me to the next part. So just to recap, what we've seen so far is when we say rejigging communities. So rejigging towards addressing what kind of scenarios. So move, while you have communities of interest, it's time to move beyond communities of interest and look at communities of practice, where the practice itself can take different connotations. It could be a practice for a role. It could be for a purpose. The purpose could be productivity improvement. The purpose could be seeding change. So there could be different purposes for which your community of practice is going to come together. Or it could even be to enthuse your team members, which is the last scenario that we saw, which is a virtual project team. So in that sense, or in that purpose, it becomes a community of passion. So that more passionate employees and you have a happier team, it's a better performing team. So having said this, we're now going to get into the next part where we said lightweight governance. So I'm glad that, a majority of you have agreed that communities can be measured. And yes, I also endorse that, because communities can be measured, and there could be different categories of measurement which will help us, give us a dipstick about how successful is the community initiative. So is it working at all? So if it is, then how effective it is. And if it is effective, how can we grow? What next can we do with it? So we'll get on to the governance aspect of a community. And why I have said that, we need to keep it lightweight is because one of the key things about community is, see, the primary output of any community is knowledge, right? And knowledge per se is intangible. So when we talk about governing communities or managing communities, then we are actually talking about paradox. Because people in communities share their experiences and knowledge in a free-flowing way, and they use their creativity to do so. By very nature, communities are informal, they're organic and spontaneous. So if we supervise them very heavily, or if we interfere with them, then it's against the very basic tenets of the community. So this in turn gives us a challenge, and therefore the opportunity also when we enable communities in an enterprise. And that's why I have emphasized on that term where we say lightweight governance, right? So what we do is, if we look at governance in 3 dimensions, the first dimension is operational. So we say, okay, if we want to govern the operational aspects of a governance, so this is definitely an easy thing to do. Given the sophistication in IT systems that we have, in automation that we have in the world today, this is definitely an easy thing to do. So what we have is a community meter. Now we say that a community is active if the community is growing, okay? And growth necessarily need not be confined only to subscriber base. Growth can be subscriber base also. But over and above that, it could also be growth in terms of the content. So how many ideas are getting shared? How many good practices are getting exchanged, right? How many events are happening? In those events, how many people are participating? So growth, collaboration, employee engagement are all tied to each other. Why? Because if you have a community which is predominantly expert-driven, so you have a community of practitioners, let's say all the SMEs related to a particular area, a process area, are coming together, they are collaborating, and they've created a community. Now, in this community, one of the prime indicators would be the level of engagement of all these SMEs in terms of responding to queries that are posted, challenges that are posted. So then active collaboration and employee engagement are tied to each other. The community is conducting webinars every month. So how many people are actually registering for the webinars and listening to the webinar, and post the webinar, they would prefer to do a redux on the webinar with the expert who conducted the session in the first place. So then you know that your community is a very actively engaged, employee engaged community. So growth, collaboration, and engagement, therefore, are operational metrics or measures that indicate whether your community is alive, it's ticking, it's active, and it's able to infuse a larger audience out there, which is the subscriber base. Right? So this is the first thing. So it's a very fundamental metric that is needed to know if your communities are alive. Otherwise, we've seen, I mean, even in public forums, we do see people coming together, forming groups, but after some time we don't even know whether the group exists or not. So it dies its own natural death. So this is an important metric to ensure that, to monitor and to know if the community is alive and kicking or not. Right? So that's the first one. The second one is a tactical metric, a tactical measure, which is basically about how has the community renewed itself. When we saw the early slides and we said that a community can have a focus area, it can have an identity for itself, and that identity could range from anything like learning, knowledge sharing, it could be good practices, it could be innovation, innovation that worked, innovation that failed, it could be anything of these. So how has the community evolved itself? How has it renewed itself? So maybe the community came together just to share ideas on something. But having done that for 1 quarter, the entire community decided, okay, let's now focus on mining good practices related to these areas in the way we work. So it moved away from mere knowledge sharing into specific knowledge sharing related to good practices. And having done that, they said, okay, we've mined about so many good practices now. Can we adopt this? And by adopting this, can we create some improvisation in our ways of working? Can we look at something that's emerging out of this? So then you see stages of maturity in terms of the identity movement of the community itself. Now, it's never an either and or. It could be either or and a combination of all. So a community can continue to be a learning community, a knowledge sharing community fundamentally, but then that whole learning, knowledge sharing can be focused, it can be streamlined into something more specific, something with a definitive purpose, right? So that's a tactical measure. The next one is a strategic measure, which is where the business is interested in, saying that what is this community influence? So are we saying that before we started this community, we had only X experts in these areas, and after this community has been formed, we have now discovered Y experts, right? So my expert discovery is this much percentage, and it's only increasing quarter on quarter or periodically, right? That's one. Or when we started the community, and this community was looking at only these 5 sub-expertise areas, and today it's covering so many more. So we have discovered so many new expertise areas. So is this an input for some of the department in the company to take up for some structured intervention? So that could be a second influence. The third influence could be, it depends on who the practitioners are, saying that we've been working with this particular business model, and increasingly we're seeing an industry trend which is moving. So we have experimented on a new business model in a fail-safe mode. But can we take this new business model to a larger audience to discover new business models? It could be the number of good practices that were mined, the number of good practices that were mined and adopted, and because of adoption, what kind of operational efficiency was brought about, efficiency or effectiveness that was brought about by adopting the practice. Was it faster requirements engineering? Was it error testing? Was it lower defects, that got into beta? It could be a whole lot of practices related to that. Then you could look at third, which is trend spotting. So when you have a distributed, advocate and change champions who are working for you in a community, and in one of the chapters, let's say for this year, we're saying is, okay, let's go look at trend spotting. What are the trends that are coming up, let's say, in virtualization? So that could be an area where communities are going to work on, they're going to share and exchange notes, and through that arrive at some incidences which they can present, right? Or it could be faster adoption of new processes. And more importantly, it could also be process-related improvements. So these are some of the things that we can strategically measure when we have the right scenario which is mapped onto a community, and we also have the right kind of measures that come out of it, right? Now, the enablements, so we've seen these are the operational measures, we've got tactical measures, and then we've got the strategic measures. Now, when we say operational measures, so why I said, the kind of automation systems that we have, the kind of software support that we have today, it makes this enablement so much easier and easy on governance. So we have a leader, we have the subject matter expert, we have a core team in any typical community. So what would they want? So they would actually look for services that they can use. They would look at collaboration tools, they would look at expert lists, forums, how do you locate subject matter experts, how do we provide updates to the larger community, how do we build a knowledge base. So while they use all these utilities, the indicator, the footprint indicator would tell us about whether the community is growing, it is collaborating, it is employee engaged, because right from services to events to vehicles, all these would be important metrics that would indicate these 3 aspects of whether the community is growing, it's collaborating, and it is engaging with its subscriber base, right? One second. So before we get there, so this is one. Now, eventually, what we are saying, so it's all about, aggregating collective wisdom and giving everybody the chance to opt in. So this is actually from The Future of Management by Gary Hamel. So one of the most fantastic new thinkers, and doing some exemplary work in redefining the way management principles are. So it's all about aggregating collective wisdom. There is a distributed group, there is a distributed wisdom. How do we aggregate it? And how do we streamline the collective wisdom into something which is of value addition, which is meaningful to both the giver and the taker? So the core community leader could be the taker, and the rest of the community is the giver. So there's a mutual give and take for everyone in that. And most important is, how do we give everyone the chance to opt in, to be a part of it, to be a part of a change is seeded across, right? So this is all I have for you in terms of the slides, and now we can open the forum for questions and conversations. Yes, Mohini, we can have questions now.
I assigned you a few questions.
Yeah. Okay, so I have your questions. I don't see the first question. Just a second. I'm just going to expand this. Give me a minute. So I have something from Sarang, but I don't see the question beyond hi, Ambika. So Sarang, I'm not sure if you missed typing the question. Mohini, are you able to see that question from Sarang?
No, that is not a question. That was just a sample that I sent you. The questions would have started after that.
So, sure. So I have a question from Mahesh. Where Mahesh is asking me, what does it mean by fresh ideas? So fresh ideas could be related to change. For instance, let us say you want to start a new initiative, okay, a new initiative which involves getting people to volunteer for some service in the organization, right? So, or you want people to be a part of a large event that is coming up. It could be related to, let's say you're doing an innovation event, and you want people to be a part of it. Now, to run that event itself, you need some new ideas on how to go about running that event. So then you seed it through the community itself and seek fresh ideas. So that could be one. Another related to work itself is, let's say you've been using certain processes in the organization, and you want some new ideas in terms of, how can we improvise this process area. So then you could reach out to a larger audience which is using those processes and ask for fresh ideas in that area. Okay, I have a question from Ravi. Ravi says, can we see the enabler side and see what the SMEs have to do? Can we see the enabler side? Yes. So you can. So the community initiative, as I said, is not restricted only to any particular department. It's not like only core IT has to run communities of practice. Communities can be run by any organization or sub-organization. So you could have admins running their own communities of practice. The recent case in point about the entire storm Neelam that crossed us also is a good idea of, can we look at emergency rescue teams or disaster management? So that could itself become a community topic where, admin and other personnel can come together and see how do we address these kind of problems, right? So Ritesh has a question, says, how we collaborate technology with management. So Ritesh, if I got your question right, so technology enables us to measure, and what we measure, we manage. Okay. That's for Ritesh. We have so the next question is from Fateh. Fateh says, can you share some of the tactics for valuable employees performance appraisal? Fateh, I'm not sure if I got the context of your question, but organizations can tie up community contributions, participation in communities, but not any kind of contribution, but differentiating contribution, differentiating participation as one of the parameters on which the employee can get measured and thereby rewarded, right, as part of the appraisal system. Shekhar has a question that says, what should be the tactics of the newcomer to get enrolled in the Fresh Ideas implementation? So the tactic, therefore, Shekhar, is if you're a part of an organization where you have communities, you've got to look out for a community which solicits fresh ideas. Because in a community, it doesn't matter whether you're a fresher, a newcomer, or very senior person. A community is it's a group it's a democratic group. So it doesn't matter what or who you are. What matters is what you share, which is meaningful to the rest. Okay, Ashish is asking, how can we measure process implementation versus overhead in small organizations? Well, Ashish, it depends on what is the rigor that you need for the process implementation. So there are certain, process implementation techniques which is better kept lightweight. Otherwise, the overhead eats up into the benefits that you can derive from the process implementation per se. And one of the best ways, a good way to get some ideas in terms of whether this process implementation needs to have this much rigor or not, or if we know that there is an over rigor and that needs to be made more lightweight, is actually turn it back to the community. So throw open that entire question to the community and crowdsource the possible ways in which that particular process implementation can be made better and if needed lightweight. So take the community consensus and input, and whatever you create as a pilot, you can take it back to the community, let them vet it, and come back to you. So what does it mean? Speed up new ideas. So speed up new ideas is, so if there are new ideas that you want a larger audience. So when you say speed up new ideas, there could be two. One is generating new ideas itself. Like there was someone else who asked a question saying, I'm a newcomer and how do I get into new idea generation? So when you have a community in your organization which encourages people to share their ideas, and when you analyze those ideas, then you could get a lot of new ideas because you're getting a distributed workforce out there thinking up ideas and giving you ideas. So that's what I mean by speeding up new ideas. Inderpal has a question, says, hi Ambika, don't you think once a person volunteers for the community, he gets more involved with it and the focus gets away from regular work? Well, Inderpal, this is what I said at the beginning, that yes, it is a paradox, but then a person who's a part of a community becomes a part of it because either it's directly associated with the work area that I am involved in. So being in that community helps me perform my work better, right? So that is one possibility. And the other thing is, if I am a part of a community which is not directly related to the line of work that I'm doing currently, but it could be a line of work that I want to be involved in some way or the other because it's an interest area for me, then it is all about providing a forum for developing or cultivating the passion of the employee. So that is what it is. And I think as as committed professionals, any professional person will always know how to do the balancing act and will never let work suffer. Okay, I have a question from Rajesh which says, what kind of community will be better for virtual team engagement? will it be better to have work related to maybe informal life or for passion? Well, Rajesh, you need not necessarily demarcate it. You could actually have it for both. So it could be work, and through that work, it could also be understanding the passion of the employee or the team member. For instance, we ran an experiment which is very interesting in a distributed team, where we wanted to know what are the hobbies of the team members of a distributed team. And what came out of those hobbies, some of it was so interesting and so different. And through that exercise, the entire team stickiness itself improved, right? And the other, fringe benefit of this was that through those hobbies, we also discovered that there are some areas that our team members are experts in, which could be leveraged in the current scope of work. It could help do the work better, right? So there's no real demarcation. You will have to take the call based on what your team works on, how it is engaged, and accordingly position your community-related activities. Okay, Anil's question is, hi Ambika, I think every enterprise measures everything linking with the budget. My question is, does this community affect the organization budget? Well, Anil, it depends on whether your community is an interest-based community or is it a practice-based community. So if it's a formal community where output is expected and an output that dovetails into an impact for the organization, then yes, there could be some funding from some other group in the organization which could help in the community charter. So it depends on where your community is positioned. But one of the most important investments for any community is the interest, the passion, the involvement of the people who form the community. So I think that's the one big investment that is needed. Okay. I have a question from Inderpal again saying also why most of the communities are being converted to commercial organization. Okay, example Ubuntu becoming commercial as canonical. So why most of the communities are being converted to commercial organizations? So the scope of this session Inderpal was mainly communities within an organization, which is what I said, when we said the canvas was about communities in a large enterprise. So there are communities, formal communities in an enterprise, which also go on to spawning off, a business group, so which has a business focus. But they definitely leverage the community to get continuous practical insights to feed in for the larger business purpose as well. Fateh has a question, says, which are some of the key factors for evaluating community performance at the workplace? So Fateh, I did answer this. I think the operational measures are definitely very key, what we call as a community meter or a community health meter, because it tells you, whether the collaboration is happening, and, if there is no collaboration, if there is no growth of content, if there are no employee engagement initiatives, then you know that it's either a dormant community or a community that's going to die eventually, right? And all these factors, if you see, come from the ability of the community to help each other. So practitioners to practitioners, peer to peer, they help each other on the community-related topic area. So it could be, as I said, it could be very directly work focused. It could be a process improvement. It could be a process per se. Like, for instance, you could have a community related to automation. So you could have different kinds of communities related to tools. So these are the kind of communities where people come in with a very specific area. So there's no dilution in the kind of interactions that happen between the practitioners and the peers, along with the core community group. Yeah, so do we have any more questions? Okay, we have Shekhar saying the scenario told by you really is amazing to hear, but in most of the organizations this seems very difficult as they only focus on work. Now in this case, are there any online communities to get enrolled and get the self-development? Shekhar, could you just extrapolate when you say online communities to get enrolled for what? To know more about communities? Shekhar, if you could clarify that, I could respond to you. Okay, meanwhile, we have one more question from Ravi, which says, what are the key things that the core team needs to do to enable the operation of a community? It's a very good question, Ravi. So there are, there are some what we call as the toolkit for a community, which we need to put in place. One is definitely a very lightweight process. How does one go about creating a community, forming a community, launching a community? So that's the process part, which needs to be kept very minimalistic. So that is one. Second is, I said it's a distributed team, so you definitely need IT systems. So you need an automation system to help give the virtual face to the community. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is to ensure there is governance. So the core team has to keep doing lightweight governance. In fact, I would say that using the term governance is itself a paradox, because you don't really govern a community, but you monitor them. So that you know if the community need any support or an intervention or any help to help them move forward or to help them revive. So those are some of the things that a core team needs to do to enable a community operation. Yeah, Shekhar, I did not get the clarification from you. So, because I don't know what specifically are you asking for. Are you asking for online communities to get enrolled, to know about communities, or to get self-development? So I wanted you to extrapolate that question of yours. Okay, so any more questions? Ashish, that would be an impossible question for me to answer. What percentage of the Indian origin organization do really opting or opt for this practice? Well, it's not about origin. It doesn't matter which origin you are. Community, it's beyond the origin of a person. It's about people who share common interests or share, common areas of interest who come together. So I don't think this question is relevant.
Well, thanks for the insightful presentation, Ms. Ambika. It was really a great session. I'm really thankful to you for conducting this webinar. I would also like to thank all our participants for the support in making this webinar a success. The recording of the webinar will be available on techgeek.com by evening. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much.